Welcome to the How to Be Awesome at Your Job podcast.
The idea with change is recognizing that if we're not getting better, we're getting worse. They said, I think I'm doing pretty good. I don't think I need any support. But the reality is the company continues to grow and to change. The person they're married to continues to grow and to change. And ultimately, that person gets left behind. And I have seen them be blindsided. The leaders who are the most coachable, it has an enormous impact on their career trajectories, where they can go, and the type of impact that they can have on the broader world around them. No matter what anyone tells you, no matter what the feedback is, whether it's glowing or it's horrible, just say thank you and only thank you.
That's Jacquelyn Lane, president of the 100 Coaches Agency. She plays matchmaker to some of the most elite executive coaches in the world and the clients who learn to love them. Her latest book, co-authored with Scott Osman and Marshall Goldsmith, is a Wall Street Journal bestseller. It's called Becoming Coachable. This is How to Be Awesome at Your Job, episode 924. Jacquelyn, welcome to How to Be Awesome at Your Job.
Thanks so much for having me, Pete. Happy to be here.
I'm excited to dig into some of the wisdom you've got in your book, Becoming Coachable, Unleashing the Power of Executive Coaching to Transform Your Leadership and Life. But first, could you open us up with a really powerful story about how being coachable was really impactful for somebody?
One of my favorites is of our friend Hubert Joly. And Hubert Joly was brought in as the CEO of Best Buy at a time when Best Buy was fully expected to go bankrupt. I'm sure a lot of people remember Circuit City had gone out of business just a year or two before. And Hubert was one of those people who had just come from McKinsey. He was a McKinsey consultant, and then he'd been the CEO of another company called Carlson. This is self-described, by the way, described himself as being someone who had all the right answers, who knew how to do things. And that was a lot of his job, especially as a consultant, was to be the person with the answers. But he realized very quickly with Best Buy that he didn't have all the answers and that he was going to need some help. Luckily for him, he had Marshall Goldsmith as his coach at the time. And they decided to go against some of the conventional wisdom, which was at that time to cut headcount, to right-size the company, reduce expenses, and try to save it in any way they could. But instead, he realized that the frontline workers probably had some answers. So he says his favorite thing that Marshall taught him was that he would go into a store and say, hello, my name is Hubert Joly. I'm the CEO of this company, and I need your help. And in that moment, he became very open to other people having the answers, including, again, these frontline workers, people that he wouldn't normally have gone to. And they did have a lot of suggestions for him about how to compete with Amazon and what they were hearing and seeing from customers. And ultimately, he took their feedback and advice. He right-sized the company, or actually, they didn't actually reduce any headcount because Hubert came up with the term. He said, we can't afford to reduce heart count. And heart count is really the heart of our company. That's how we're going to turn things around. And it was this amazing story where over the course of, I think, 5 or 6 years, the company grew 330% at a time when the S&P 500 remained almost flat. So it was this amazing turnaround story, all because he was open to being coachable, leaned into the process, and made real change.
That's good. I am the CEO and I need your help. That sounds about as coachable as you can get right there in terms of I am almost desperate in terms of, seriously, you've got the stuff. That's awesome, Jacquelyn, about the Best Buy CEO there. I'm curious if you have another story about someone who's perhaps more in the middle of their career.
So for the sake of anonymity, I'm going to change some details of this story and just say that this is a mid-level leader at a major manufacturing company. And we were approached about finding a coach for him. There were some things that he was struggling with where he just wasn't listening to feedback particularly well. Some people on his team were either a little bit afraid of him, certainly intimidated by him, just had this attitude that he knew best. And I remember when we talked to the head of HR and she told us about him, she mentioned that this is a great guy that we would love to see promoted in the organization. But the reality is he's burning people out and he's making a little bit of a hostile work environment for them. And so unfortunately, if these things don't change, this could be the end of his career, right? We may need to actually get rid of him, even though we would love to be able to promote him because we think that he could be someone who let's say could be a major executive in the future. And she was skeptical, certainly, that he was going to be open to being coached. But again, he really started leaning into that process and recognized that he had to make a change. And he got excited about the process of making a change because he started working with a coach who was really fantastic and I think inspired him and painted this picture for how life could be different. And so they started working on some things together. And amazingly, within 3 months, he got 1 promotion. And that was great. And they came back to us again in 3 months after that. So 6 months have elapsed and he got a second promotion. And the head of HR said, "You would not believe the transformation." Not only has he completely changed the way that he interacts with his team, they're all gelling as a team so much better and it's so much healthier. But he attributes all of this change and growth to getting a coach. And so the entire organization is now saying, this is an amazing transformation. We're interested in being coached as well. And she said, but the other thing I didn't tell you 6 months ago when we first talked was that there was someone else in the organization that had a very similar situation. And it was very clear that he could also benefit from some coaching, but he didn't really want to get a coach. And so unfortunately now, 6 months later, not only has this other guy gotten 2 promotions in rapid succession, but that other guy is no longer with the company. So I think that's a great example, too, of someone who leaned in and the difference that it made for them, for their life, and for the entire organization.
Absolutely. And then I'm curious then, what would be an example of a behavior that someone starts or stops doing and discovers from a coaching kind of a process that can make a big impact in terms of changing the trajectory from gonna get fired to gotta get promoted?
For this gentleman, he was originally all about himself. He cared about his own role and positional power and authority, very proud of the life and career he'd built for himself and was vocal about that. And again, the attitude was like, I'm in this for me. And the major change was that he realized he was not going to be a leader without followers, that he needed to change his perspective into serving the people who reported to him and to removing obstacles from their path, putting their needs first, not, understanding how they were feeling, understanding the culture of the team and the organization. And the funny thing is, of course, by shifting his perspective away from himself and towards other people, he created so much more for everyone. He created a healthier work environment for them, but he certainly created more for himself since he did get those 2 promotions in rapid succession. So it's just amazing that one shift can have such a profound impact.
How prevalent is coachability in this day and age in the workplace? And how do we measure such things?
Right. It's funny. I think of coachability as being very much a spectrum. It's not quite as binary as coachable or not coachable. I think we're all coachable to some extent. And I believe that there are people who are truly uncoachable? I'm not totally sure. The jury's out for me there. But that's part of why we use the word becoming in the title of our book, Becoming Coachable, because it's always this journey of becoming. So it's not as common, though, as you might think, for people to really understand what that means or how to lean into that process. It's a word, coachability is a word that's being thrown out more and more these days, especially I hear in the world of executive search and other companies that are looking to identify successors to major C-suite roles. They're asking, is this person coachable? So it's becoming more and more requested, more and more looked for. But I would say most people, probably, maybe half of the people we talk to at the 100 Coaches Agency are ready, willing, and eager to lean into the coaching process. But I think by the way that we work and in working with a good coach, they naturally become more coachable and more open to the process. So if they're going to get any results by the end, yes, they are definitely a coachable leader.
Well, as I think about the word, and I'd love to hear your definition, it is a spectrum. But generally speaking, those on the less coachable side of the spectrum, when you offer some input, you'll hear defensiveness, why that's wrong, excuses, and more or less, the input is one way or another rejected. And there's those on the opposite side of the continuum, when very coachable, would say, wow, they really think about that, they chew on it, they ponder it, they seek to understand it. Can I have some examples? And then they get after that. And so that's how I view the word coachability. Do you have a particular definition that you utilize?
Yeah. No, that I love the way that you broke that down, Pete, because I agree. It does have a lot to do with the way that we respond to different stimuli. It's a mindset and some of these behaviors. And certainly we can get into some more of that. So to understand what coachability was and what that meant, my co-authors and I decided to talk with a lot of the people that are within the 100 Coaches community and just hear their thoughts. Because again, over and over and over, we heard the same thing, that the best coaching engagements are with people who are coachable, that's the major differentiator. And so we started digging into this, trying to understand, what does that really mean? What goes into coachability? And there were 4 key elements that came up as common themes repeatedly. And that's being open to change, open to feedback, open to taking action, and open to being held accountable. And if a leader can do those 4 things, then they most certainly are coachable.
Certainly. And do you have a sense from your research, what kind of an impact on career trajectory do we have if you're highly coachable versus not so coachable?
I think it has an amazing impact on someone's life and career. And that was one of the most surprising findings as we were really researching and writing this book, was that the leaders who are the most coachable, they go on to be some of the most successful leaders. And the reason is, if you are a leader who's open to change, open to feedback, open to taking action, and open to being held accountable, then those are all qualities of great leaders. And so it has an enormous impact on their career trajectories, where they can go, and the type of impact that they can have on the broader world around them.
And I'm curious, going meta for a moment, talking about coachability. Are there some beliefs you've had about coachability that you used to have, but you've since abandoned or changed those beliefs?
Well, I used to believe that coachability was a little bit more binary. I did really believe, for example, that some people were beyond being coached, that they were not coachable. But really, if you are willing, I think that's kind of the first word, willing or open, then you can be coached. But I would say a lot of people have disbelief at first. And I think a little bit of skepticism is common and maybe even wise, right? But if you're willing to suspend that disbelief for just a little bit, lean into the process and recognize that none of us do this alone, that we all need support in some form or fashion, then that really begins us all on the process of becoming coachable.
I'd love to maybe step into the shoes of someone who might be on the lesser side of coachability or might have some valid concerns or skepticism. They say, hey, I think I'm coachable. It's just most of the feedback I'm getting is from total idiots who are way off base. How do we discern that, Jacquelyn? Like, maybe we're getting some garbage feedback or input coaching, or maybe we're being super defensive and resistant about it, and we got to look in the mirror. How do we make that judgment call and discern and disentangle that?
Right. Maybe it's some of both. It probably is. Most people are not very skilled at giving feedback or not trained in that. Similarly, people are not really skilled or trained in how to receive feedback. So it's no surprise that it's a little bit messy in that area. I find that acceptance is a great first step. Just hearing it for what it is. And Marshall has this great simple rule. He says, no matter what anyone tells you, no matter what the feedback is, whether you agree or disagree, if it's glowing or it's horrible, just say thank you and only thank you. Because if you respond to a first piece of feedback and you say, wow, that's so great, thank you so much for that feedback, that's fantastic, right? And then the next piece of feedback that person gives, you say, okay, thank you, I'll think about that. And then the last piece of feedback, you respond and say, I don't know if that's true, or I don't know if that's on base. Well, what you've done right there is you've graded the feedback. You say, I agree, I'm not sure, and that's horrible. So A, C, and F, right? If you were going to give letter grades for that feedback. And that actually makes people less likely to tell you things that you don't want to hear. So the best thing to do, and maybe it's a little bit unnatural at first, the best thing to do is to say thank you and just thank you, nothing else. And that's really begins that process. But of course, once you receive that feedback, it's time to chew on it a little bit. Again, this goes back to what I was saying earlier, maybe just suspend disbelief for a moment. Just sit down, think about it, ponder it, maybe overnight, sleep on it. And if it still feels like it was completely off base, it's still telling because they still had that perception of you. And so if only for that reason, it's very interesting to note. And they've given you a great gift by telling you what they really think. So at the end of the day, if we can just change our relationship with feedback and see it as the gift it is, I think we'll respond much better.
That's well said, Jacquelyn. And feedback really is a gift. And that's almost cliche. It's like, oh, feedback's a gift. I've heard that. But I mean, I think I'm realizing just how wisely true it is because one, it takes a risk for someone to share something with you, particularly if it's challenging, as opposed to, you're great, Jacquelyn. Oh, thank you. That's awesome.
Yeah, I feel good about myself.
But if someone gives you a critique, like they're really putting themselves out there. And they're taking a risk for your benefit, maybe. And there's some sociopaths out there from time to time who are not doing it for your input. They love to watch you suffer. That happens, unfortunately. But for the most part, when people have something to share, they are doing so at a risk or a cost or some discomfort to themselves for your benefit. And it truly is a gift. And it's funny, in the world of podcasting, I've been really just dorking out on stats lately. And I was looking at Apple Podcasts and this thing called followers, and just how over these years, I have had thousands of people go through the effort, which isn't that easy, to do several taps on Apple Podcasts and click unfollow the How to Be Awesome at Your Job podcast, which is heartbreaking. But not once has someone said, Pete, I've decided to unfollow your podcast. And here's why. There's 4 things that you're doing with your show that really aren't working for me. And so I thought it might be helpful for you to know about them. That's never happened once. And likewise, I think in our own lives and professions, there are lots of people noticing lots of things we're doing to our detriment that are harming us and our ability to get where we want to go and are not opening their mouths. And when we are just blindly stumbling in the dark, fundamentally unaware of these pieces of input that we need. You got me on a soapbox, Jacquelyn. So where feedback is a gift, I don't think is just a cliche, but it is a profound truth that we reject because it usually sucks to hear.
Right. Well, and again, we're not trained at how to give or receive feedback very well. Again, it's one of those blind spots in our education system. You would think that somewhere along the way we would learn this, but unfortunately, there's not a great system yet. And so, of course, I think of myself. Anytime when I was working in corporate America, someone said, "Hey, can I give you some feedback?" What was the first thing I did? I immediately buckle up and I prepare myself, to go to battle or to be told something really abysmal. I have a physiological reaction to hearing the phrase, "Hey, can I give you some feedback?"
Yeah.
I mean, I think a lot of people do because we don't normally call positive feedback. We usually call it a compliment or praise. And so usually when people say, "Can I give you some feedback?" they're really meaning, "I want to give you some constructive criticism."
Yeah, that's true. They rarely say, "Hey, I want to give you some feedback about that report you gave me." Okay. It was perfect in every way. Do everyone just like that, please. It's usually not what comes after that sentence.
Correct. Correct. So I really would love to rebrand the word feedback in that way and start using it in both a positive and constructive way. But Marshall gets around this by doing what he calls feed forward. So Marshall says that the word feedback, kind of by definition, is referring to something in the past, right? Feed forward is about what can you do differently looking forward. So that's another way to frame it that just kind of naturally by construction feels a little bit more positive and a little bit more constructive.
All right. Well, let's put ourselves in the shoes of the feedback receiver and say, okay, fair enough. There's a baseline physiological reaction in which someone is giving us feedback. We don't like it. So that's sort of there. Can you share with us, is there a way we could learn to love it?
Yeah. Again, I think this is a training exercise that we all go through. And I will certainly speak for myself and say that I work on this all the time. Of the 4 elements of coachability, change, feedback, action, and accountability, feedback is the one I struggle with the most. And it's some of my own, again, experiences in corporate America and my own relationship with that word. But it's this constant exercise that I have to make with myself to say, feedback is a gift. Feedback is a gift. I'm going to remind myself that this person is sharing really valuable information with me, and this is for my ultimate betterment. Whether it's something I can improve, a way that I can grow, or simply understanding how it is that I'm perceived in the world, that is a wonderful gift to receive. Because again, none of us do this alone. And especially for people who are in leadership positions, we need the reflections of other people. And it becomes so much more difficult for leaders to get feedback, especially because there's some real and perceived power dynamics that are at play. So especially for people who are leaders, we have to be constantly asking our team, asking the people around us, what can I do better? What can I do differently? How can I serve you? And I find that they're often a little shy at first, but that feedback has been just so rich and has allowed me to grow exponentially faster than if I didn't have that in my life.
Absolutely. And it's interesting when you mentioned the senior executives, it's rarer and rarer and harder to get. I'm reminded of a friend of mine who's a relationship therapist said that she's given some tough feedback to some big deal corporate executive folks, and they love it. They're like, wow, nobody gives me this sort of perspective on how my behavior is problematic. Nobody. Except you, relationship therapist, and they eat it up. So it's like, it's rare, but boy, they're open to it, and it's hitting the mark.
Right. But I love that they're hungry for it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that attitude, it will take us so far. If we're hungry for it, if we're asking for it, I find that is really positive. That's another thing that's helped me, because when someone says, hey, can I give you some feedback? That's feedback you weren't expecting. But when you ask for feedback, hey, do you think you could tell me how I did in that presentation? Do you think you could tell me how my latest podcast appearance was? Then the feedback is solicited and expected. And I find that I am much better prepared to receive it.
That's excellent. Oh, so being open to feedback, we shared that key part of it is just embracing that mindset. Feedback's a gift and returning to it. Likewise, for the other open twos, open to change, open to taking action, open to accountability, are there any master paradigm shifts or perspectives that really open that opening all the wider?
Right. I think for me, the other big one is change. And there's a reason that open to change is the very first in our construction, is that really everything is changing. And we find so many people have this idea of control, or that they want other people to change, right? If only other people would become coachable, if only other people would change their perceptions of me, if only other people would make changes, then my life would be better. But I think the call is to look at ourselves first and foremost, and especially for those of us who are in leadership roles, to really lead by example and be open to making changes ourselves. And the way that we live that and the way that we communicate that with other people has enormous ripple effects.
Well, let's say that maybe I want to be open to change, but I'm actually not. I'm comfortable. I got a good groove going. I don't want to rock the boat, but I know I should be more open to change in order to unlock new vistas of opportunity and goodness. So how do I shake myself up?
Again, I think it comes back to that idea of awareness or openness. And that's part of why we use the word open to describe every element of coachability, because we find that just that openness makes such a difference. But again, the idea with change is recognizing that if we're not getting better, we're getting worse. I don't think, especially with so many things changing in the world around us, I don't think there's any such thing as just staying in the same place.
Can you expand on that? If we're not getting better, we're getting worse. Can you prove it?
So I think of a few different executives we've seen over the years. And again, that was roughly the attitude they had. They said, I got here because of my skills, my merit, my natural personality and gregariousness, or my innate leadership skills, and I'm pretty satisfied with the life and the career I've built for myself. I think I'm doing pretty good. I don't think I need any support. I think I'm going to stay here. And I get that to some extent, but the reality is the company continues to grow and to change. The person they're married to continues to grow and to change. And ultimately, that person gets left behind. And I have seen them be blindsided by both a company that has decided they're no longer really serving the needs of the organization and how that's evolved, or a spouse who decides, you know what, this just really isn't working for me anymore. And so I think there's an openness to reinventing ourselves because the world around us is not staying still.
That's powerful. It's in some ways that's self-evident. And yet, if you really stop and ponder these implications, it is just a very tidy, logical argument. Your surroundings, environment, world, profession, everything is changing. If you are not changing, then by definition, you are fitting
yesterday's needs
worse. You're fitting worse than you used to. And by that measure alone, you are worse.
Right. That's correct. If you have certain skills that got you here today, by tomorrow or next year, those skills will no longer be enough.
And when you put a loss frame on it, it really sort of sparks the motivation. So
I couldn't agree more. And I think to myself of the example of professional athletes, right? No professional athlete could possibly consider themselves at the very top of their game without at least one and probably multiple coaches, because they recognize even if they're the best in the world, if they're not still consistently pushing the limits and getting better and working with someone who can see them from outside themselves, then they're not going to stay in that number one spot very long.
Right on. Okay. So we talked about openness to change, open to feedback. How about open to taking action?
I think this one, it feels the easiest in some ways, or at least the easiest conceptually, where you can express being open to change and open to feedback. You can talk your way through those things, but action is where the rubber meets the road. So in our example of, let's say I want to get in shape. I can express that I'm open to making a change in my life or my lifestyle. And I can hear some feedback and some ideas from the people around me about going to the gym or getting a trainer or changing my diet or any number of things. But when it comes time to actually do the work, am I going to show up and go to the gym and put in the reps and do it again and again and again and again? Because let's be honest, change is hard, but it only works if we work.
Yeah, that's true. No doubt. So so for feeling lazy, you have any words of wisdom to spark us into get going, take that action?
Yeah. Again, for me, this is where I find that I need support. I need a coach. And now a coach can come in a lot of different forms. Certainly, this can be someone you hire as an executive coach or a life coach or any number of different areas and specialties that exist out there. And there are some great agencies and organizations that help people find the right coach or right resource for them. Or this can be a friend, a close accountability partner, a peer that you work very closely with. In some cases, it can be a supervisor. Kind of depends on the relationships that exist in someone's life. A mentor is similar, not quite the same thing as a coach, but depending on some of those different relationships that exist in your life, you may be able to find that support that helps you remember your goals and actually take the steps to achieve them. So for me, again, like I'm using my own example of I want to get in better shape, I had to hire a personal trainer. New year after new year, I was committed to getting in better shape. And the gym was crowded. I came up with too many excuses. I can't get up early. I don't want to do the work. But it wasn't until I started paying money to a personal trainer and I knew I was going to be paying the money whether I showed up or not. So I might as well show up. And that was what I needed to really make the change, take the action, and make it stick.
And Jacquelyn, I really appreciate you sharing that and the humility there because, you are a high-powered, high-achieving, very capable woman.
Thank you.
Your accomplishments, your credentials are plentiful. And yet, and you want to be in better shape. And yet you were unable to accomplish that for yourself for years.
Right.
Until you hunkered down and parted with money to have someone assist you in the matter. And in my experience with personal trainers, no offense to the personal trainers listening, it's less about their deep expertise in anatomy, physiology, and movement, and more about the fact that they make you do the thing that gets it done.
Right. I could not agree more. And I'll give you another example. So Marshall Goldsmith, right, who's my co-author at Becoming Coachable. And I've spent a lot of time with Marshall. Marshall is, by most people's accounts, the number one coach in the world and has been for decades, right? He invented a lot of the tools that we use for coaching today. And Marshall literally pays someone to call him every single day for the last, I don't even know how many years, to ask him his daily questions.
That's right. We had Marshall on the show and we discussed that. And I love that. So underscore there. So a key to taking action is perhaps having another human being help you to take that action.
Right.
Well, that kind of sounds like we're already talking about your fourth open to accountability. What do you got to say about this?
The key idea behind accountability is you want to make the change lasting. So accountability is especially pertinent if you have reached a certain goal. Again, you've gone to the gym, you put in the reps. Again, so taking that action and the accountability are intertwined. But then at some point, I think when I'm no longer working with that personal trainer, am I still going to maintain the habits? Right? So I'll give you another example. I was working with a personal trainer for about a year and a half. Again, got in great shape. We had a great relationship with him, and I was seeing him twice a week to go to the gym. But when I stopped working with him, there was a moment in time where, again, I kind of fell off the bandwagon. I stopped working out and I got really frustrated with myself, and I realized it's because I needed accountability. And so my husband actually became that accountability partner for me. So now twice a week, we have it on the calendar and we go to the gym together. If my husband does not go to the gym with me, I don't go to the gym, period. And I consider myself a pretty motivated person. And yet I'm so good at finding excuses why I can't. Just too busy. I got to send that email. I got to call that person. I got to clean the house. But there's something about having an accountability partner, be it a coach, a trainer, a friend who just says, no, we're going to do this, makes a world of difference.
All right. Well, Jacquelyn, tell me, any other critical do's or don'ts you want to make sure we put out there to help people become more coachable?
Yeah, I think it's the big thing is to remember why we're doing it. Why does any of this really matter? And I think the answer that we came to in writing this book is, yes, being coachable helps us get more from our coaching. We have goals and ambitions that we want to meet, and that's great. And those are important, but it's even bigger than that. It's not just about having a better life. It's not just about becoming a better leader. And I agree that becoming a better leader is a great thing as well. But engaging in this process and becoming coachable also makes us better human beings. We learn how to interact with the world around us better, to see ourselves reflected in the feedback of other people. And so we start to see our place in the world and our impact in the world in a more accurate way than if we just see things from only our vantage point. It's like, have you ever heard the many eyes theory? It's like when a school of fish are swimming and it looks like the whole school of fish just moves around obstacles. Or again, a shark will swim into the school of fish and they will seem to disperse and rejoin. But it's this idea of many eyes, that a single fish actually can't function very well on its own. It's more susceptible to predators, which is why they end up staying in schools. And in fact, they kind of have this mind that melds in a way where there's these theories that these fish see through the eyes of the others, that they become aware of things in a way that they could never do on their own. And similar when we become coachable, that we can experience life through the many eyes. And ultimately, the power of that is that in understanding the impact we have on people and on the world around us means that we can live more flourishing lives. We can have more flourishing communities, better flourishing families, our companies, and certainly ourselves.
Beautiful. Thank you. Jacquelyn's about to share her favorite things. And one of my favorite things are our sponsors. Today, we got Stanford Continuing Studies and UpliftDesk.com. At Stanford Continuing Studies, you can immerse yourself in a diverse selection of courses available both online and in person. This winter, perhaps you'd like to explore the captivating field of artificial intelligence and expand your horizons about what lies ahead, or maybe dive into some essential business skills in marketing, communication, decision analysis. My favorite. Did somebody say hypothesis-driven thinking? And issue trees, that was me. I said that. Boosting decision-making skills can be so game-changing in life and business. They got project management and a whole lot more. The continuing studies courses are open to everyone, so you don't have to trek it out all the way to Stanford's campus, though it is beautiful and I recommend you pay them a visit sometime to enjoy that Stanford learning. Their winter registration is currently open, and as a How to Be Awesome at Your Job listener, they're hooking us up with a lovely 15% discount this quarter. To snag it, use that promo code AWESOME when you enroll. So if you're ready to embark on your educational journey, discover more at continuingstudies.stanford.edu. That's continuingstudies.stanford.edu, or you can find the link in the episode description. Also want to thank our sponsor, upliftdesk.com, who's providing us with a 5% discount with the code AWESOME. I use my Uplift Desk every workday when I'm recording the show, trying to have brilliant thoughts, preparing stuff, and doing just about anything work-related. When I'm able to go from sitting to standing and then back in seconds, is surprisingly game-changing. I got my first Uplift Desk over 5 years ago with my own money and have dutifully moved it every time I have moved, which has been more than I wanted to, because it's so good, and that's furniture I don't want to live without. When other furniture didn't make the cut, I recently got another one for my home office. I like to stand when I want the creative juices to flow, sharpen the alertness, and then I want to sit again maybe when it's time for a rest, to chill out a little bit. The Uplift Desk is super sturdy. It doesn't wobble. You can customize it with over 100 desktop choices and hundreds of accessories. Their online configurator is a lot of cool and fun to play with. They offer free shipping, free returns, a 15-year warranty. Great service. I've had a lovely experience with them, and they've got thousands of reviews with a 4.9 average Google rating, sharing a similar tale. They ship the desk so fast. I'm in love. Go to upliftdesk.com and use the code AWESOME for 5% off your order. That's Uplift, UPLIFT, desk.com to get 5% off your entire order with the promo code AWESOME. Well, now could you share with us a favorite quote, something you find inspiring?
One of my favorite quotes, this is attributed to the Buddha, is that a single candle can light 1,000 others and never be diminished. Okay.
And a favorite study or experiment or bit of research?
I am really loving this study currently called More in Common. It talks about how much commonality we have with people, even on opposing sides of the political spectrum. And if we can just learn to remember the things that we have in common instead of our differences, how much more powerful we can be as a collective.
Okay. And a favorite book?
My current favorite book is David Brooks's new book, How to Know a Person, The Art of Seeing Others Deeply and Being Deeply Seen. I think it is the most important book written this year. I highly recommend it.
And a favorite tool?
Well, right now it would be hard to say I don't love ChatGPT. That has been my go-to for a number of different use cases. And I'm sure everyone is coming up with creative ways to use it. And we certainly are over at the 100 Coaches Agency as well.
Well, let us know, Jacquelyn. It's so funny when I play with it. I mean, sometimes I'm annoyed and frustrated, and other times I'm amazed. And it's just, I've yet to really get clear on the boundaries of this is what this is amazing for, and this is what this is totally terrible for. So tell us, what do you think it's amazing for?
Well, I am currently using ChatGPT where I'll tell it, you are a world-class therapist or a world-class coach. Here's what I'm struggling with, or here's what's going through my mind. What would you advise me? And just asking it for some ideas. And then I find, and I can even instruct it, ask me a few good questions, right? And I'll answer those questions, and then the cycle continues. So it's a really powerful thing if I want some quick feedback or some quick ideas to essentially stop looping and get out of my own head. I found that that's really powerful. It's great for summarizing content, especially on notes from a call or anything else, and putting together action plans and next steps. It's been really fantastic.
Okay. And is there a key nugget you've shared that really seems to connect and resonate with folks? They quote it back your wisdom to you often?
I do find that the idea that's resonated with people has been the third section of our book, which is called To What End? And that's where we talk about human flourishing and the power that great leaders can have on the world. It's really this aspirational and inspirational idea. Would love to hear what people think about that.
Okay. And if folks want to learn more or get in touch, where would you point them?
I would send them you can go to 100 Coaches Agency. That's agency.100coaches.com, or you can go to becomingcoachable.com. Of course, you can find me on LinkedIn. My name is Jacquelyn Lane, and please connect. Let's stay in touch.
All right. And do you have a final challenge or call to action for folks looking to be awesome at their jobs?
I think just keep that growth mindset. Keep an open mind, stay humble, stay hungry, ask for feedback. Can't go wrong with any of those.
Okay. Well, Jacquelyn, thanks so much for this. I wish you much fun and much coachability.
Thank you so much. Right back at you, Pete. Thank you.
I really love Jacquelyn's strong wake-up call. If we're not getting better, we're getting worse. And to that end, you may have noticed that we're trying to make some adjustments. I listened to your perspective on the surveys and a message that the environment has shifted, perhaps to shorter attention spans, or just impatience, a desire to get to the point quicker. And so that's what we tried to do with the opener. We're experimenting. We're trying some new things. Let me know how it's going for you. Pete@awesomeatyourjob.com, in which we're giving a taste for, hey, what's some stuff that the guest said that's really interesting and valuable? And is this worth me listening further? And let's get right to it all the faster. So giving that a shot so that we are getting better instead of just staying the same, which apparently means we're getting worse. We've got extra resources for you, the show notes, the transcript, the links to items that we've referenced. They're found at awesomeatyourjob.com/EP924. I hope to catch you next time, and peace.
Thanks for listening. To get the most out of the show, we recommend 2 key things. First, check out the extra resources at awesomeatyourjob.com. You can find this episode's transcript and links, as well as the perfect episode for your situation. You can search the full text transcripts of hundreds of episodes or explore episodes tagged by topic and competency covered. Second, subscribe to the podcast and get future episodes automatically. You can subscribe by telling Siri and several other smartphones and speakers, subscribe to the How to Be Awesome at Your Job podcast, or by tapping subscribe in your podcast player of choice. If you'd like some extra help figuring out podcasts and how subscriptions work, visit awesomeatyourjob.com/subscribe for guidance. Hope to catch you on the next episode of How to Be Awesome at Your Job.